A pre-wedding dinner is being held on the Nantucket beach for Benji Winbury and Amelia Sachs. Greer Garrison Winbury, Benji's mother, as well as the mother of his two brothers, Thomas and Will, wished her son good luck in his new life. All the guests were having a great time. The party was very pompous. Merritt Monaco, the bridesmaid, was very happy for Amelia. Shooter Devil, the best man, was equally happy for the groom. Everyone raised a toast to the future. Isabelle Nallet, a French friend of the family, was also present. However, she preferred to keep her distance, as personal space was important to her. Thomas Winbury, the oldest brother, began openly flirting with Isabelle while Mr. and Mrs. Winbury gave their blessings to the bride and groom on camera. Everything was going well until a scream pierced the night. Something had happened in the water. In the morning, a call to the Nantucket police immediately jolted Deputy Sheriff Carl awake. He called his boss Dan Carter right away. The sheriff told his daughter Chloe that her services wouldn't be needed today, as there had been a death, and the wedding was cancelled. This shocked the girl, who immediately messaged someone. The police cordoned off the crime scene, the beach. It was Amelia, the bride, who had discovered the body. Sheriff Dan Carter and Detective Nikki Henry spoke with Roger Pelton, the wedding planner. Incidentally, Detective Henry had been sent here by the district attorney. This house belongs to the family of Tag Winbury. Several generations ago, the family lost most of their fortune in gambling, yet remained one of the wealthiest in the area. Mr. Pelton and all other potential witnesses were brought in for questioning at the police station. Then it was Amelia Sachs' turn to be questioned, and she was still in shock from what she had seen. The detective was curious about why she was in her wedding dress and where the wounds on her legs came from. Dan Carter understood that Amelia was too shaken to answer clearly. He offered her some hot tea and gently asked her to recount what had happened the day before. The previous morning, Amelia woke up and found a love note from Benji. Noticing a ladybug, she carefully took the note. Meanwhile, Greer was overseeing the wedding preparations. Seeing her future daughter-in-law in only pajamas and without a robe, Greer was puzzled. She doesn't tolerate a lack of manners. Everyone describes Mrs. Winbury as a very controlling woman, even the sons are afraid of her. Amelia, on the other hand, comes from a humble family. She doesn't care about the pomp and luxury with which the upcoming wedding would be celebrated. When the girl ate a bun at breakfast, Greer reprimanded her, saying she wouldn't fit into her wedding dress at that rate. The others pretended not to hear. The head of the family joined them for breakfast, easing the atmosphere slightly. Amelia tried to ignore the negativity when she got a call from Merritt, her best friend, who was already on her way. In the present, the maid, Gosia, testified during questioning that she had as usual prepared a healthy breakfast for Mr. Winbury that morning. Abby Winbury, Thomas' pregnant wife, suggested that Gosia was secretly in love with Mr. Winbury. Everyone, including Roger and Isabelle, finds Tag extremely attractive. Caro, the family's personal jeweler, brought the wedding rings. Greer was thrilled. Caro noticed that the hostess wasn't wearing the exquisite gold bracelet Tag was supposed to have given her. Claiming she had things to do, Greer asked the maid to see Caro out. Then, after digging through her husband's papers, she found a check and realized Tag had bought the bracelet for someone else, as Greer had never received it. When the middle son entered Tag's study, Greer immediately pretended everything was fine. Benji only wants his mother to be kinder to Amelia. She's not like them, but that doesn't make her any less worthy. Greer understands that her son is crazy about Amelia, but she also wants to be sure that Amelia feels the same way. Although the girl is well educated, she doesn't fit in aristocratic circles at all. Benji can't believe his mother is bringing this up now, before the pre-wedding dinner. But ultimately he decides not to push things to a conflict. No one knows what is really troubling Greer. Later, she received a call from Enid Collins, her editor, who wanted to make sure everything was set for the publication of Greer's book next week. She and Tag are scheduled for an interview with People magazine under the headline The Perfect Couple. They have been married for 29 years, and no one doubts that they are indeed the perfect couple. From Greer's voice, Enid sensed something was wrong, but Greer said she had to go. Behind the facade of a perfect life lies an unpleasant truth. Greer ignored a call from a certain person named Broderick Graham. During her interrogation, Abby and others revealed that Greer knows how to keep secrets. Her reputation always comes first. That day, Tag went with Amelia to meet her parents. The girl was very worried because her mother is sick with cancer and has recently become very absent-minded. She is also deeply self-conscious about her condition and never removes her wig in public. Tag promised her that no one would ever know. Amelia was overjoyed to see her parents, who had traveled by ferry. Tag was extremely polite and welcoming. Upon seeing Summerland, the Winbury estate, Mr. and Mrs. Sachs were left speechless. They had never seen such luxury before. Greer and the other family members greeted the guests warmly. Everything seemed fine, everyone chatted pleasantly, and they took a group photo. Merritt, The bridesmaid also arrived, as did Shooter Devil, the best man. Gosia, the maid, was annoyed by all the fuss. Two families from such different social backgrounds were spending time together. Shooter let it slip to Merritt that Will, the youngest of the Winbury brothers, had recently been dumped by his girlfriend. Merritt immediately suggested they take a photo together to make everyone jealous. Will was clearly flattered. In her police questioning, Isabel described Merritt as unencumbered by morality. It turned out that Abby had known Merritt for quite some time. She had once dated Abby's boss. Thomas asked the father for a loan until his temporary troubles passed. But Tag wants the son to solve his problems on his own. Amelia knows that Greer doesn't like her. Merritt reassured the friend, saying it doesn't matter what Greer thinks. The most important thing is how Amelia feels. But Amelia is unsure whether she truly loves Benji. He is handsome, kind and wealthy, and Amelia realizes how lucky she is. But she isn't infatuated with him, and this troubles her. Merritt eased the friend's worries, attributing her doubts to pre-wedding jitters. It happens to everyone, and it's perfectly normal. Due to her illness, Karen feels constantly weak and has to take strong painkillers. Each time she needs a higher dose. Benji enjoys drawing and wants to surprise his beloved. Amelia applied light makeup, watching as the friend enjoyed herself with Shooter in the pool. For the wedding, Benji gave his bride a special gift, a portrait of her as a queen. Benji loves Amelia deeply and knows he's the luckiest man. Yet at times Amelia feels she doesn't deserve Benji, and this weighs on her. To distract herself, the girl went for a run on the beach. In the present, everyone continues to testify at the police station, describing Amelia as a simple girl. She washes her own dishes, which many find unacceptable. Near the crime scene, an oyster knife was found. The police consider it a very odd choice of weapon. The detective, sheriff and his deputies are reviewing footage from the pre-wedding dinner. Merritt gave a touching speech in honor of the couple, saying that she had never before seen such sincere love. Benji also gave a speech, sharing how he met Amelia at the zoo where she worked. In that moment, Benji knew he had met his destiny. During the slow dance, Abby asked her husband if he had spoken to his father about the money. He evasively replied that he had. Tag kept the apartment for them only until the end of the month. Thomas assured his wife that everything was fine. He couldn't let her find out just how dear their situation truly was. Amelia and Merritt are very close, and drunk Thomas doesn't shy away from joking about it. Benji advised his older brother to go swimming to sober up. While the party continued, something horrible happened on the beach. Early in the morning, Amelia tried on her wedding dress in front of the mirror. Suddenly looking out the window, she noticed something alarming on the beach. Amelia went closer and realized it was the body of her friend, Merritt. The girl cried out in despair, calling for help. Naturally it caught everyone's attention in the house. What happened to Merritt? Amelia can't calm down, somehow blaming herself for everything. Yesterday during the fireworks at the party, the girls argued because Amelia didn't support Merritt. Now she can't forgive herself for it. The forensics team continues to work at the crime scene. Den Carter has already spoken to the medical examiner and knows that numerous abrasions were found on the body. The technicians also found the victim's phone and a men's jacket in the seaweed. It's still unclear what happened to Merritt. Greer is taking calls from sympathetic people. Everyone is terribly upset that the wedding had to be postponed. Seeing a dirty glass in the sink, Abby quickly washed it, even though such things are undesirable in this house, as there are servants. Detective Henry questioned the girl about her acquaintance with Merritt. Abby said that Merritt was very fun-loving and free-spirited, having relationships with many guys. Abby didn't notice anything suspicious yesterday. Meanwhile, Greer apologized over the phone to the guests for canceling the wedding at the last moment. She seemed entirely unconcerned about the girl's tragic demise. Everyone is on edge now, especially Thomas. Tag wants everything that reminds them of the wedding removed from the house. In the current situation, such decorations are inappropriate. After her police questioning, Amelia can't regain her composure. She remembered noticing a new bracelet on Merritt's wrist last night. Amelia realized that Tag and Merritt were having an affair. Of course this upset the girl, since Tag is her future father-in-law. The family members offered Amelia their support, even Greer. Amelia wanted to be with her parents, unable to stop crying. But her mother still heard almost nothing, as she had taken a pill and was dozing. Amelia deeply regrets that she can no longer apologize to her friend for yesterday's quarrel. Tag doesn't like that the police are working on his property, turning everything upside down. The Winbury family is in the public eye and doesn't want to attract unnecessary attention. Besides, Tag is convinced that what happened to Merritt was an accident. Perhaps she had too many mojitos and decided to swim, unaware of the strong sea current. But Detective Henry has another theory. The girl might have had an affair with one of the guests, which eventually led to the tragedy. Amelia overheard Greer urging family members to stick to the story that Merritt harmed herself because she was abusing substances. Greer believed this would help mitigate the press's attacks. But Amelia knows that Merritt wouldn't have done that because she was eagerly awaiting something. It seems that Tag knows what that was. Amelia doesn't want to make false statements, but Greer managed to convince her that it would be best for everyone. Nikki Henry feels that Denkart is too lenient with the locals. Den explained that it's the only way to ensure cooperation. Amelia watches old videos with Merritt, which makes her cry. Benji told the wife that his mother had already spoken with the lawyers and asked her to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Greer is a public figure, and scandals could harm their family. Amelia likes this situation less and less, but for the sake of her future husband she agreed to it. Later, Shooter told Benji how sorry he was. The situation feels unreal. Benji found it strange that Shooter was so upset, as he barely knew Merritt. When Benji left, Shooter left a voicemail for someone, asking them to call back urgently. In the local bar, Dan and Nikki matched all the available evidence. 2 people's fingerprints were found on Merritt's phone, and one of them belonged to Shooter Devil. When Deputy Sheriff Carl returned to the Winbury guest house, Shooter was already gone. He was about to leave in the meantime, but the police caught him right on the ferry. Witnesses have varying opinions about Shooter. Thomas and Isabel, a family friend, are having an affair. He constantly steals pills for her from everyone. Thomas suspects that Abby is beginning to catch on. He's open to telling his wife the truth and being with Isabel, but she sees it as just a temporary fling. Thomas doesn't understand why no one takes him seriously, not Isabel, nor his parents, nor his clients. He's eager to work in cryptocurrency, but so far all his business ideas have failed. Now Thomas is waiting for Will to turn 18 so that all the brothers can get their share from the trust fund. Thomas owes money to many people, including Isabel. Hag is anxious because the police still haven't left his property. During questioning, Roger revealed that Tag and Greer married purely for convenience. Abby plans to leave because she wants to get herself in shape before giving birth. However, Thomas doesn't have the money for this, which leads to a conflict between the spouses. While Greer was working on her new book, she received another call from Broderick Graham, which she ignored again. Hag offered his wife a drink. It might have seemed like everything between them was the same, but Greer knows well that her husband has something to hide. The police may also find out sooner or later, and Tag can't stop thinking about it. He asked Amelia to talk privately, hinting that she should stay out of it. But instead, she went to the police station and told the detective and sheriff about the affair between Merritt and Tag. This doesn't make him a criminal, but clearly he had a motive. Detective Henry makes no secret that Merritt didn't perish from an accident. Someone deliberately harmed her. The worst part is that Merritt was pregnant. Amelia couldn't understand how her friend could do such a thing. Greer also knows Merritt was Tag's lover, the bracelet confirmed it. This means Greer also had an obvious motive. A year earlier, Tag and Merritt met at a beach party when she was arguing on the phone with her stepfather. A conversation started between them. In the present, Amelia told the police about Merritt's pregnancy. Dan doubted that Tag was the father because Merritt gave the impression of a very frivolous girl. However, Amelia knows for sure that isn't true. Although Merritt often flirted with many, it never went far. Tag grew anxious when the receipt for the bracelet went missing. He also feels that Amelia isn't on his side. At night after her fiancé had fallen asleep, Amelia entered Tag's office, not knowing exactly what she was looking to find. In the hallway she ran into Greer, lying that she was just looking for a drink. But Greer guessed that her daughter-in-law had been in Tag's office and firmly asked her not to do it again. Tag's nervousness is growing. Greer is more concerned about the upcoming interview and her book's release. Roger suggested postponing it, but she doesn't intend to change her plans. Amelia doesn't want to be part of this show, but she has no choice. Only now did everyone notice Shooter's absence. Meanwhile, he's being held at the police station. The guy demanded a lawyer but was ignored. Will, whose palm was bandaged, arrived at the Carter's house and climbed through the window to talk to Chloe. But Dan heard them and intervened, unhappy about the boy climbing into his house. The girl often works part-time at banquets as a waitress. That's how she met Will. During the pre-wedding party, he saw Merritt on the beach. Dan asked the young man what happened to his hand. Will said he just hurt his palm on the beach. Dan drove Will out of his house. Chloe will later have a serious talk with her father. During police questioning, Abby called Will a weirdo. He's become more withdrawn lately. Gosia said with a smile that Will loves her dumplings. Abby advised Amelia to stay in the shadows to survive in this family. If Greer feels threatened by Amelia, it could end badly for her. Abby mentioned that 5 years ago when she started dating Thomas, she also signed a non-disclosure agreement after May Pratt, Will's French tutor, disappeared. Abby has always felt something bad happened. Amelia asked Benji why he never told her about May Pratt. He said that May just decided to leave without saying goodbye. It was a long time ago and has nothing to do with what's happening now. However, Amelia feels that Benji isn't telling her everything. Journalists from People magazine interviewed the Winbury couple about their perfect married life in Greer's book. But the garden interview was interrupted by rain. Behind closed doors, the couple's life is far from perfect, of course. Each of them is simply playing a role. Tag is tired of this lie and only wants to live with his wife like a normal family, but Greer knows about his infidelity, so she doesn't believe his words are sincere. Amelia refused to be in the family photo for the magazine. Greer accused her daughter-in-law of not loving Benji enough. Amelia calmly replied, saying that she has a different view of love. Greer didn't want to continue this conversation and ordered Amelia to put on something more presentable. The girl had no choice. No one in this house considers her opinion. According to Merritt's call logs, someone kept calling her from one number, and she ignored. That caller turned out to be Benji, who in a voice message asked Merritt not to tell Amelia anything. In the meantime, she found many photos of Merritt among Benji's drawings. He seemed obsessed with her. Everyone is waiting for Amelia to come down for the family photo. She had to fake a smile to keep up the family's reputation. Greer wants Amelia's parents and Isabel to be in the photo too. They have to look like the perfect family. No one still knows where Shooter is. During questioning, many claimed that Greer and Shooter, who lost his mother at one time, were very close. For now the police released Shooter, but he's forbidden to leave the island, as are the other witnesses. Dan invited Nikki over for lunch at his home. During the investigation, they had gotten along quite well. The detective managed to find out that most of Tag's accounts were frozen, which is why Greer churns out several books a year to pay for everything. Dan introduced his daughter to Detective Henry. Chloe clearly didn't like the presence of a strange woman in the house. In the evening, there was a dinner at the Winbury mansion. Shooter joined as well, evasively saying that the police just wanted to talk to him. While everyone was distracted, Shooter whispered to Greer that he hadn't mentioned anything about the money. Everyone admired Gosia's culinary skills. Bruce Sachs noticed that his daughter seemed troubled. And although the family members tried to maintain casual conversations, the tension between most of them was evident. Amelia unexpectedly asked Greer why she makes new family members sign non-disclosure agreements and what happened to May Pratt. Thomas smiled and said that was a very good question. Greer, Benji and Tag tried to change the subject. Will, on the other hand, didn't quite understand what they were talking about. Drunk, Thomas revealed that when their father broke up with May, she was planning to sue. Then Tag and Greer paid her to simply disappear. Will left the table, insulting his own parents and saying that what's going on in their family is disgusting. Amelia realizes she shouldn't have brought this up. At first Greer was calmly enjoying her wine, and then she ordered her husband to go check on Will. Benji whispered to his fiancée that he truly didn't know many of the details about May's sudden departure. All evening, Nikki and Dan were rewatching the video from the pre-wedding dinner and noticed that Merritt was often chatting with Will. Receiving a call from the lab, Nikki found out that the DNA traces at the crime scene belonged to Will Winbury. Entering the daughter's room, Dan didn't find her there. The window was open. At the same time, Will's parents were searching for him all over the beach. Meanwhile, the young man was preparing to escape by boat into the sea. His hatred for his own family was that strong. Many years ago he had been in love with May and made her a paper heart. After that, May left without even saying goodbye. All these years, Will thought it was because of him. Chloe tried to talk him out of going into the sea, but he was determined. Amelia is no longer sure that Merritt was entirely honest with her. Who could have wished her harm? A storm was brewing. The whole family is still searching for Will. Suddenly Amelia, who joined the search, stumbled upon a pile of clothes, where she found Merritt's bracelet. Without hesitation Amelia took the bracelet to the police, saying it was among Will's belongings. It's already morning, and the teenagers haven't been found. Chloe is missing along with Will. In the meantime, Amelia told the detective about the bracelet. The girl is convinced that the whole family is hiding something. Dan Carter was informed by the Coast Guard that the teenagers had been found. This news brought Greer a sense of relief. Will and Chloe are now in the hospital. Detective Henry asked Amelia about Shooter Devil. His attempt to escape the island on a ferry looks suspicious in light of everything going on. Amelia has no answer to this question. She remembered when she first saw Shooter on the Winbury private plane. He seemed quite nice to her. To Shooter, the girl's face immediately looked familiar, but she denied that they had met before. When Shooter and Amelia arrived at the Winbury summer residence, none of the family members were there yet because Benji had mixed up the dates. He promised to arrive in 5 hours. Shooter has been here many times before. He showed Amelia the beach and shared how he met Benji at university. At the time, Shooter was going through a hard period after losing his mother. Benji loves helping people and supported the friend in a tough moment. Amelia understands Shooter like no one else because her mother is also very ill. They hit it off right away. Amelia doesn't believe Shooter could be involved in Merritt's demise, but Detective Henry apparently has a different opinion. Dan Carter went to the hospital to ask Will personally how he could have put Chloe in danger. Dan promised that next time he wouldn't be stopped by the fact that Will is from an influential family. The sheriff is now interested in why Merritt's bracelet ended up among the young man's belongings. Will didn't want to talk because then one person would get hurt, but the sheriff forced him. During the pre-wedding party, Will overheard Merritt telling his father about her pregnancy. Later, Will approached Merritt, telling her that his father would never leave his mother. Merritt said he would have too. That night, Merritt dropped the bracelet on the beach, and Will found it. Afterward, when he was about to eat an oyster, he cut his palm. That's how it all happened. Will just didn't want his mother to know about his father's affair. Dan took the young man home. Will was still very angry at the family members. The home phone rang, and Abby picked up. The person on the other end introduced himself as Broderick and wanted to speak to Greer. Abby immediately suspected something was wrong. Tag wants to know what his youngest son was talking to the sheriff about. The young man yelled that it was just about the boat. Abby announced to everyone that Broderick Graham had called. Greer denies knowing him. This only increased Abby's suspicions. Broderick Graham was calling Greer from a motel. But all his attempts to contact her are in vain. Regardless, she continues working on her new book. Amelia directly asked Shooter why he wanted to escape the island. Shooter replied that he was just scared, but Merritt had nothing to do with it. Amelia said that she found drawings and photos of Merritt among Benji's things. Shooter is sure there's an explanation for that. Not getting a clear answer from him, Amelia asked her fiancé about it. Benji replied that Merritt just wanted him to draw her, nothing more. Amelia no longer knows what to believe. She realized that her fiancé was aware of his father's affair. Benji admitted it. He tried to convince Merritt to end it, but then she just stopped answering his calls. Benji would never do to Amelia what his father did to his mother. The lovers promised each other not to keep any more secrets. Shooter can't shake the feeling that he and Amelia have met before. The girl understands that she will never truly fit into this family, but it doesn't bother her as much as it once did. In this house, Shooter understands her like no one else. Suddenly the guy remembered seeing Amelia on a train 3 years ago on Independence Day. He immediately felt that this girl was very kind. Their heart-to-heart conversation was interrupted by Benji. Hugging her fiancé, Amelia involuntarily felt shame. The next morning as the guys were walking along the beach, Shooter said how sorry he was. He thought Tag loved Greer and would never betray her. Bruce prefers to wash his clothes himself rather than using the maid's services. Mr. and Mrs. Sachs are mourning deeply for Merritt, who was like a family member to them. Right now Amelia is very afraid that the mother will leave her soon too. Strong painkillers are her only salvation. Greer continues to work on her book. The husband tries to get her attention, but with the book launched tomorrow and the house full of guests, she has no time for him. Now Tag just wants to win back his wife, assuring her that he loves her as much as ever. However, Greer can no longer believe him. Everything has changed. She no longer wants Tag even to touch her. But he couldn't hold back. Passion arose between them. Afterward, Greer resumed working on her book, recalling how at the party she told Merritt that to her latest lover, she was just one among many. To everyone's surprise, the girl refrained from drinking alcohol. Now Greer can't stop thinking about it. Thomas and Abby decided the wedding cake was unnecessary anyway, so why not eat it? Benji didn't like this, but Thomas obviously didn't care. This led to a conflict between the brothers and even a fight. Abby had to intervene before it went too far. In the evening at the bar, Greer met with Sheriff Carter. She had never been here before, but now she'd come to apologize for Will's behavior. Or is that not the main reason? Dan had already reviewed the toxicology report and knew that barbiturates were found in Merritt Monaco's body. Unexpectedly Greer handed the sheriff the receipt for the bracelet her husband had given Merritt. This could change the course of the investigation entirely. Amelia feels increasingly attracted to Shooter. She decided to be open about it with him. He feels the same way. They kissed. The doorbell rang. Detective Henry and Sheriff Carter asked Tag to come to the police station with them. Benji caught his fiancée and his best friend together. At that moment his hatred knew no bounds. Tonight Amelia slept in a separate room. Greer already knows what happened, joking that Benji saw Amelia as a saint, but now she has come down from heaven to join them, sinful mortals. Amelia wants to move to a hotel today, but Greer can't let inappropriate talk circulate on the day of her book's release. She doesn't need gossip. Amelia had no choice but to stay. And though Greer remains proud in public, a storm of emotions rages within her. Tag spent the night at the Nantucket police station. remembering how shortly before the tragedy, Merritt confessed to him that she was pregnant. Tag seemed happy. Merritt hadn't expected such a reaction from him, as he was married. During the interrogation, Tag did not deny his affair, which had lasted for several months, but that doesn't make him guilty. However, Detective Henry and Sheriff Carter began to press him, believing the pregnant mistress was a nuisance to him. Tag tried to be patient, but if the officers continued in the same manner, he intended to call his lawyer. Tag also mentioned that the last time he saw Merritt was in the tent with Isabel, a family friend. Abby even feels sorry that Amelia likely won't become part of the family. Everyone already knows what happened. Amelia was genuine, not fake, which is why Abby saw her as an ally in this family. Amelia realizes she made a big mistake. Abby advised her to come to Greer's book launch today with her head held high, to prove to everyone that she cannot be broken. Everyone was congratulating Greer on her success. Enid was surprised that Tag wasn't present. Greer explained that he wasn't feeling well. Chloe, who was working as a waitress again, approached Will to say hello. He suggested they meet up later, but the girl wasn't sure if she could. Only with Abby's support does Amelia not feel trapped here. She was surprised to learn that Shooter is obscenely rich. According to Abby, he just doesn't make a big deal about it. Benji didn't even approach his fiancée. Tag doesn't understand why Dan doesn't believe him. Dan has known Tag since he moved here with his daughter after his wife passed away. Isabel advised Benji to forget about his fiancée's silly affair. In her opinion, it's no big deal. This brought a puzzled smile to Benji's face. Tag continues to insist on his innocence, claiming he has nothing more to add. The detective and sheriff made it clear that they would find out the truth, no matter what. When the police left the interrogation room, Tag remembered how in the tent, after most of the guests had left, he hinted to Merritt that they should go kayaking. Gosia noticed it. Tag waited for Merritt on the shore, and soon she came. She wasn't sure it was the best time for a kayak ride. Right now all she cared about was whether Tag was really ready to leave his wife. He admitted that he needed time to work things out. Obviously Merritt was upset by this answer, especially since it involved a child. Thinking that Tag didn't want her pregnancy, Merritt burst into tears and walked into the water. Tag tried to calm her down. In the present, he is still being held at the police station. He decided to tell the sheriff and detective about his argument with Merritt on the beach. His smartwatch can confirm that at 3 a.m, Tag was already asleep in his bed, while Merritt, according to the forensic report, died later. Meanwhile, Greer's book launch party was in full swing. Isabel offered Amelia some champagne, advising her not to worry about what others think, as Greer always does. Life can be wasted that way. Isabel recalled how she saw Merritt on the beach in hysterics after the pre-wedding party. Later, once the girl had calmed down a bit, she shared with Isabel that she kept choosing the wrong men. Isabel said that all men are the same and offered Merritt a drink. Suddenly Isabel accidentally broke her glass. It was painful for Amelia to hear that her best friend had felt that way in her final hours. Shooter tried to apologize to Benji, assuring him that there was nothing more between him and Amelia, but he was punched in return. Witnessing this, Amelia tried to reason with her fiancé. But Benji was heavily drunk and behaved erratically, drawing the guests' attention. Amelia led him away from everyone, into the kitchen and gave him some water. However, it didn't help much. Although Benji is still angry with his fiancée for that kiss, he can't deny that he loves her more than anyone. Passion flared between them. While Greer was giving a speech to her fans, Tag returned home. He was finally released from the police station and started drinking purposefully. At some point, Greer noticed Broderick Graham among the guests but showed no sign of her concern. Chloe discreetly handed Will a paper heart. Isabel was sitting right next to them. Greer read aloud the first chapter of her book. When Broderick came closer, she quietly asked Roger to call security. Broderick loudly announced that Greer's book was complete rubbish. The guard politely asked him to leave. Greer turned it into a joke. However, the chaos didn't end there. Drunk, Tag began to draw attention to himself and took the microphone from his wife, publicly declaring that their marriage had been rotting for a long time. He also claimed that all 28 of his wife's bestsellers were just talentless trash. Nothing went the way Greer had planned. This was Tag's revenge for her attempt to pin the crime on him. Greer did her best to smooth things over, but the party was hopelessly ruined. When drunk Tag fell off the stage, balloons rained down from the ceiling, as if in mockery. Carl provided the detective with data from Tag's smartwatch. Henry noticed something suspicious. 2 people had slept in the room every night. But on the night of the tragedy, according to the breathing pattern, only one person was in the room. Shooter wanted to talk to Amelia. She called him a liar, just like all the Winberries. Shooter hadn't told her from the start that he was rich, which made her think they were alike. But in reality they were not at all. Amelia had nothing more to say and left. Sheriff Carter hadn't expected to see Greer at the bar a second time. Women like her usually didn't appear in such places. Greer had hoped to find the sheriff here. Meanwhile, Carl informed Detective Henry that on the night of the crime, Greer had called Broderick Graham, who had been thrown out of today's event at the Winbury house. Carl already got the file. Greer offered the sheriff her theory that Isabel, who had always been in love with Tag, learned about his affair with Merritt and decided to get rid of her rival. However, Dan was certain that Greer's motive was far more obvious, and her attempts to help with the investigation looked extremely suspicious against this backdrop. Dan received a call from Nikki Henry and Carl, who reported that half an hour before the crime, Greer had been on the phone with someone named Broderick Graham, who had flown in from London. He was somehow connected to the Turkish mafia. Since then, Broderick hasn't stopped trying to reach Greer, but she's ignoring him. And the best part, a bank transfer of $300,000 in Broderick Graham's name from Shooter Devil. Now Dan had no doubts that Greer knew more than she was telling. She hurriedly left the bar. On the night after the pre-wedding party, Greer watched through the window as Merritt was on the beach. At some point the girl began to feel unwell. Someone approached her. All morning, Greer has been receiving calls about the husband's outrageous behavior at her book launch. Benji no longer holds a grudge against Amelia. Greer found information online about the National Institute for Addictive Disorders. Her husband could benefit from it. In the morning while his wife was still asleep, Thomas was planning to meet with Isabel. Maybe Abby has long suspected everything. Greer hadn't expected her son to forgive his fiancée so quickly. She asked Amelia for a private conversation, asking if her late friend had abused barbiturates. Amelia answered that she definitely had not. The sheriff and detective appeared on the Winbury doorstep once more. The police wanted Greer to come with them this time and answer a few questions. The house was searched, and all potential evidence was seized, including Greer's laptop. Every family member wondered how they could help her. But Tag knew they were powerless to do anything if the police truly suspected her. Thomas told Isabel that his father still refused to give him any money. Suddenly he got a call from his wife and pretended he was out jogging. The news that his mother had been taken by the police caught him off guard. During the interrogation, Greer claimed she barely knew Broderick Graham. But the police had a different theory. She had hired Broderick, who was connected to the mafia, to get rid of Merritt and convinced Shooter Devil to pay him. Greer insisted that both she and Shooter had nothing to do with it and that it was a complete waste of time. All the members of the Winbury family were on edge. Their house was surrounded by reporters. Everyone already knew that Tag's wife was suspected of taking his mistress's life. Thomas shouted at the journalist to get out, while Benji tried to stay calm. Abby was screaming, accusing her husband of cheating, although Thomas strenuously denied it. Amelia is puzzled about how barbiturates ended up in Merritt's body. The parents urged her not to jump to conclusions. So far no one knows anything. The detective and sheriff demanded that Greer explain why Broderick had called her 9 times over the past 4 days. She explained that Broderick was an old acquaintance of hers and was desperately in need of money. At the time, Greer allegedly had no access to her accounts, so she asked Shooter for a loan. Naturally, the detectives didn't believe such incredible generosity. They demanded that Greer explain why she called Broderick on the night of the crime. She had nothing to say. Shooter met with his uncle. The guy really didn't know why Greer had asked him for a loan. Greer began to muddle through her statement, unsure how to explain the fact that she had transferred such a large sum to Broderick. Amelia called Shooter, saying she felt that everything had gone wrong because of her. Amelia was tired of pretending and wanted to reclaim her old self, the one who always helped people and knew how to be compassionate. Shooter couldn't hold back his tears, realizing that he might never see Amelia again. Mrs. Sachs panicked when she found that one of her pills was missing. Enid showed up at the Winbury house with her assistants to talk to Tag. He assured her that Greer was innocent. It was just a small town, and the local sheriff wanted to make a name for himself. Enid was disappointed because for all these years, they had been considered the perfect couple in the public eye. The publishing house had profited well from this, but now everything was upside down. Broderick was intercepted while attempting to leave the island and was also taken to the police station. Of course he denied any involvement. The detective and sheriff decided to conduct a cross-examination, asking them to explain the bank transfer. Broderick stated that it was a gift and that he hadn't blackmailed anyone. Tag rehearsed his speech for the upcoming interview, where he is going to apologize for his behavior at the book launch and publicly claim that it was supposedly a nervous breakdown due to the cancelled wedding and other problems. The detective and sheriff had no doubt that Greer and Broderick were connected somehow, but the question was how exactly. Hearing that Shooter had arrived at the station with his lawyer, Greer admitted that Broderick was her brother, who struggled with a gambling addiction. She had been covering his debts her entire life. That was why she had borrowed money from Shooter. The detective and sheriff had anticipated any turn of events, but not this one. Broderick confirmed that he owed the Turkish gang $300,000, and the sister paid off his debt. So who was responsible for Merritt's demise? The police had no more leads. They would have to start from scratch. Shooter was released as well. The video of Tag rambling nonsense on stage at the book launch had racked up a huge number of views on YouTube. Greer finally introduced her brother to the family. Her sons had no idea about their mother's brother. For the first time in her life, Greer was open with everyone, declaring that she no longer intended to live a lie. From now on, she would always tell the truth, even if it wasn't what the people around her wanted to hear. At that moment, Amelia felt a sense of relief. Greer continued, saying she was tired of living every day in fear of being exposed and dealing with the problems of her selfish husband. Of course, no one expected this from Greer. Bruce whispered to his daughter that they needed to talk in private. Learning that her mother had decided on euthanasia, Amelia could barely hold back her emotions. The thing was, one of the 3 pills was missing. The Sachs family informed the police that Karen had kept euthanasia pills in case her condition suddenly worsened. Everyone in the house might have had access to her cosmetic bag, where the medication was stored. Benji mentioned that his brother Thomas constantly stole pills. One pill wouldn't have harmed Merritt's life but would have put her into a deep sleep. After comforting her guilt-ridden mother, Amelia pounced on Thomas with accusations. He was taken to the police station for questioning. Amelia doesn't know how to ease the pain of losing her best friend. At this moment, Benji became her support and anchor. His genuine love reminded Amelia that not everyone in the world is selfish. Pregnant Abby's life is falling apart. Her husband did indeed steal Mrs. Sachs's pill before the party, which he admitted during questioning. However, Thomas denied giving the pill to Merritt. Suddenly, Thomas remembered that while drunk, he wanted to threaten Merritt in an attempt to force her to leave their family alone, but Isabel foiled his plan. Thomas has no doubt that it was Isabel who stole the pill. The fact is, Thomas owes her money. When the youngest Winbury son, Will, turned 18, all the brothers were due to receive a large sum from the trust fund. But if Tag were to have another child, they'd have to wait another 18 years. Hearing such accusations against her, Isabel thought the police were idiots. She did not deny that she'd lent Thomas money, but she hadn't expected that this frivolous boy would pay her back. Otherwise, she'd be a complete fool. Besides, Isabel has an alibi. So who is really guilty? Henry suggested her colleagues re-examine the servants' questioning. According to Gosia, Abby lied about many things. Henry remembered that Abby herself was washing a glass in the kitchen on the day the body was found. It's possible there were traces of the barbiturate on it. Thomas is still being held at the police station. Meanwhile, Abby was brought in for questioning. Later, Henry personally asked her if she knew her husband owed Isabel over $2 million. Abby said she doesn't get involved in his financial affairs. As for Isabel, Abby called her a promiscuous woman. Finally, when all formalities were settled, they were released. The family members are gossiping that Isabel has a greedy motive. But at one point the police arrived and arrested Abby. On that fateful night, when Abby saw Thomas and Isabel together, she wasn't even surprised. She hates all women who get involved with married men and decided to take revenge on them all through Merritt. The girl suspected nothing bad when she accepted the glass of freshly squeezed juice from Abby. Then Abby suggested Merritt go swimming with her to clear her mind. Suddenly Abby pushed Merritt underwater and held her there for several minutes. So this tangled story finally came to an end. Tag was so engrossed in his hobby that he didn't even have time to understand anything. At the police station, Abby underwent all the necessary procedures. Tag hopes that Greer will give him another chance, but she's planning to move to New York and write her new book there. Greer will no longer put the family's reputation first. Amelia was also going to leave with her parents. Benji saw her off. And so their paths diverged. Isabel was furious, looking for Thomas. Will and Chloe started dating. In general, all of them continue with their lives in one way or another. As Isabel hit Thomas with her bag, he shouted that the police had forced him. 6 months later, Greer visited Amelia, who had returned to her work at the zoo. Greer was the last person Amelia expected to see. Greer's new book is about Amelia, and she wants her opinion. It was Amelia who inspired Greer to stop living a fake life. All this time Greer hadn't hated Amelia, she had just been envious of her. They agreed to have dinner together sometime. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.